30 years ago, Park Palace in northern Kentucky used to be the hottest location within 100 miles. It had everything you could imagine confined within its halls. Shopping galore with over 50 stores, a generous food court with any style of cuisine you wanted, beauty salons, an arcade center, a movie theater, and even an automotive care center towards the back. It drew everybody. Then things changed. An economic downturn turned people away from spending, and what little they did spend was done elsewhere. Times were tough. Soon after this, its doors closed, with its shops collecting dust as payment. The mall shut down. As the years passed, the mall still had visitors, though. Urban explorers snuck inside to look in awe at what once was and what may never be again. But that is when something odd started happening. Over the last several years, 7 explorers went missing inside the mall, most of which were teenagers. Despite extensive searches over the course of weeks in each case, none of them were seen again. Missing person reports were still up to this day, with families still hoping for answers. This is what Henry's friends told him anyway when they suggested they go to the mall one Tuesday afternoon, on Halloween of all days. He didn't know how much of the stories were true, just that some people went missing. Did they really go missing inside the mall? Or was it just some urban legend to keep people from vandalizing the place? It was impossible to tell. It was 6 p.m. when Henry's friend Zach pulled up into the alley behind his house and honked his horn. Francine was in the front seat beside him and waved at him as he looked out the window. Henry threw on his shoes and slung his backpack over his shoulder and locked the back door to his house as he left. From there, the 3 sped off to Park Palace. "So how do we get into this place?" Henry asked. "I mean, isn't it patrolled or something?" "If you call one lazy-ass officer circling the street once every 2 hours, then yeah, it's patrolled," Zach said. "Don't worry, we'll be safe. The message boards online said to park on Gateway Street. Then we can walk to the backside of the mall from there." "You're not scared, are you, Henry?" Francine asked. Henry fidgeted in his seat a bit. "No, I'd just rather not have a police record before I even turn 18. Francine's face turned sullen as she looked at Zach. "That can't happen, right? I never thought of that." Zach laughed and rolled down his window to toss out the rest of an energy drink. "No, guys, relax. We'll be fine. We're just going to take a look around inside for a bit, then we'll leave." Imagine this, we're poking around in there and stumble across those people who went missing. If anything, we'll become heroes. "Those stories are fake," Francine said. "Those people are runaways or something. They never found anyone inside." Henry nodded his head in agreement. It was unlikely they would find anyone there unless you counted the mannequins. Zach grunted his indifference as he made a sharp turn, drifting a bit as he did. 20 minutes later, they were parked and now staring at the vacant parking lot behind the mall. The sun was setting rapidly, and the sky looked amber against the large building. "Follow me," Zach said. One of the other urban explorers said he taped the lock of the Anytime phone repair store, one of the few stores that has an exit straight outside. "We should be able to get in from there." They could see the sign for the store from across the street and started heading in that direction. Henry looked at the houses to his right and left. One had a gigantic Halloween display of the Wizard of Oz, where the witch was chasing Dorothy, a mechanical laugh emitting from a voice box every 10 seconds. A perplexed and misshapen Toto looked on from the sidelines. On the house on the other side of the street, a single god-forsaken pumpkin that wasn't even carved. "Where's your spirit?" Henry thought to himself. Just as the 3 of them were about to cross the street, a cop car passed them, making them jump. The guy stared at them, moving slower than a snail. "It's okay," Zach said. "He's gone." "Are you sure this is the best night to be doing this?" Henry asked. "Perfect night," he responded. They sprinted across the parking lot and kept their eyes out for trouble. Henry made it to the door first and quickly pried it open. It made a screeching sound like it was a mouth trying to swallow them whole. Could you make any more noise? Francine said, nudging Henry. They were in, but it was pitch black inside. Henry turned on his flashlight, and the first thing he was met with was a barrage of dust, floating in the air, creating tiny orbs in the light. He coughed. He stumbled around some empty boxes and walked through the store. It was empty too, of course, like most shops would be. No one was ever going to leave their valuables or property in a long-abandoned mall. The glass doors leading into the mall was shattered, and they had to crunch their way into the main hall. "Wicked," Zach muttered, his voice echoing in the dead air. "Look at this place." Henry looked, and it was a bit scary. There was no light in there besides their flashlights, and it did little next to nothing in the vast interior. "It doesn't look this big from the outside," he said. "It's all one floor. Why make the ceiling so high?" "To give paying customers the idea they are somewhere important," Francine said. "Make everything fancy and maybe they'd spend more." "Look at it now," Zach retorted. He kicked a plastic cup across the floor like it was a football. It landed upright, almost as if it was trying to retain some dignity in itself, in this place. "The last kid who went missing here? They said they found a trail of bloody shoe prints in the food court that were his. They followed them into the bathroom and found the shoes in the toilet. Bloody, torn, ripped." "Stop it, Zach. You're scaring me," Francine said, crossing her arms. "You want to know the creepiest thing?" he continued. "The blood wasn't even his." With that, he went quiet. They all did. Then a clap of thunder. A minute later, the quaint sound of rain pitter-pattered on the roof. It was ominous. They walked around for 20 minutes, staring at everything. Gemini perfumes, fashion fantastic, Garth's Old Earth rocks and gems, time o'clock watches. There was everything from clothing stores to tacky old gift shops in Park Palace. Key word was, everything was now abandoned. Metal gates shuttered most of the shops, and no neon lit up any of the signs or logos to give them any of the glamour of what this place once was. A few of the shops they could enter, but they were always musty and littered with beer bottles and the ashes of cigarettes. One shop, a shoe store, had a few pairs of ratty old sneakers strung up over lifeless fluorescent lights. They quickly walked out of that one. The center of the mall had a water fountain stained with rust and lime. It wasn't anything special. It was made of tiles, and there was a hole at the center of the basin where the water came out. It probably looked a lot nicer up and running. Above it was Park Palace's centerpiece, a giant glass dome over 50 feet in the air. Though it usually let in sun, tonight it was only darkness. In the food court, probably 50 tables laid vacant. Many of the chairs were stacked up against the walls or on their sides, having been strung across the room. Zach fiddled in his pockets and fished out some peanut butter candy bars. "Happy Halloween," he said through a mouthful. We were all just about to head back when we all froze. A light flickered in the distance. Then the snap and echo of heavy footsteps. "Shit," Henry said. "Someone's here." "Relax. It's probably just another group of goofballs like us out exploring," Zach said. But that didn't calm Henry down. Francine took his hands. They waited. "Hello?" An oddly deep voice rang from the darkness. The flashlight came closer, and Henry ushered them to turn off theirs. "Hello? This place is off limits. Anyone there?" The voice rang again. A man appeared. "Shit," Zach said. "Let's get out of here." Panicked, they threw their candy wrappers on the ground and ran. "This way," he said. The three of them linked hands, dashed out of the food court, down the hall and away from the man. There was a hallway and an exit sign to the left. The hall was long, but they made it. Henry tried pushing the lever on the metal double doors. It didn't budge. "Locked," he said. Zach pushed him out of the way and tried ramming it to no avail. Their unexpected guest rounded the corner and shined his flashlight down the hallway. "Hey," he yelled. "Quick, in here," Zach whispered. There were some bathrooms near the exit, and they went inside, closing the door behind them. Henry fidgeted. "What are we doing? We're trapped." "Maybe he didn't see us," Francine whimpered. Zach shushed both of them and told them to wait. Several agonizing minutes went by in silence. "See? We're cool. No need to panic," he left. "Let's just wait here a few more minutes and get the hell out of here." Henry could hear an audible sigh of relief from Francine. Then he heard an odd sound from the other side of the bathroom. A footstep. With a sense of dread, Henry turned on his flashlight, and there, not 20 feet away, was a man. They all couldn't help but scream. How had he gotten in there without them noticing? "Hey," the man said. "You're not supposed to be here. This mall is off limits." A second passed, and Henry realized it wasn't any ordinary man. It was a police officer who turned on his own flashlight and jangled some keys. "We are so sorry, officer. We didn't know," Francine said, terrified. "You break and enter into a property, and you folks tell me you didn't know you are trespassing? You could go to jail for this," the officer said. Henry interjected. "What she meant to say was we were just trying to have some fun on Halloween night, you know? We are in the wrong here, we know, but we'll leave now, I promise. It won't happen again." He waited to see how the officer would respond, and noticed him take off his cap and wipe his brow. A black ooze covered his hairline. What was that? Hair gel? The officer exhaled. "Okay, fine. You seem like good kids. Just make sure I don't see you here again, okay? It may seem odd, but I look after this mall like a child of mine. I don't want to see it get hurt. Vandalized, that is." "Thank you, officer. Thank you so much. We'll leave now," Zach said. As he opened the door, the officer grabbed him by the arm. "You folks will follow me," the officer said. "I want to make sure you all get out safely." "That's really not necessary," Zach said. "I insist," the officer retorted. Henry gulped and looked at Francine. Concern was in her eyes, too. The group all left the bathroom, and as they did, Henry noticed that the men's and women's restrooms were those two-door types, one for going in and one for going out. At least that explained how the man had snuck up on them. But something about him didn't seem quite right. The ooze on his hair and his voice that was just a bit too deep made Henry think something was off about him. But they were caught. Not much they could do now other than follow him outside. The officer jangled his keys and used one of them on the exit door that they had tried earlier. It opened, but what Henry had thought would lead them straight outside didn't. The exit door didn't lead straight out into the open air, but instead a long, dark corridor. "This is the exit?" Francine opined, once again gripping Henry's hand, and Zach's, both of theirs, tightly. "Yep," the deep voice of the officer grunted. "This way is much quicker than going all the way back out to the front. Trust me, we'll be out in no time." The door leading down that corridor clanged shut behind them, swallowing them whole. The officer locked the door again, muttering something about trespassers and campers. Henry and the others followed the officer down the hall for a while, not talking, not muttering a word. When he started whistling and jangling his keys is when it really got creepy. "I remember it, you know," the officer said, his back to them as he was 10 paces ahead. "The mall, what it used to be, what it once was. Used to be a mall cop here. It was the pride and joy of the town. It was the place to celebrate birthdays, host weddings. Hell, even the mayor held her press conferences here once a month. Now all that's gone, and the only visitors Park Palace gets are scoundrels like you, vandalizing, tearing the place apart, tarnishing its beauty. Oh, how I wish the place would reopen someday." Henry was genuinely confused. "You were a cop here? That doesn't make sense. The last time this place was open was like 30 years ago." The officer briefly looked back at him and smiled. Indeed it was. Then proceeded to whistle again. That had to make the man an old geezer, like in his 60s at least. But he didn't look that old. He didn't look that old at all. Zach, usually the loudmouth of our group, didn't have much to say. He just kept on shaking his head from side to side. 5 minutes passed, much longer than it would have taken them to exit from the front entrance. It was then that Henry really began to worry and think of the others who had went missing there. They turned left, then right. Half a dozen corridors came and went with no exit in sight. The doors they did pass looked rusted shut, like not even Hercules himself could thrust them open. The walls peeled, ceiling tiles hung off of wiring, broken in pieces. Their flashlights did little to comfort him. And the smell was getting worse, like gasoline or oil or dead rats or something. Officer, are you sure this is the way? Our parents are expecting us home soon. Maybe we should go back the other. Zach was cut off. Almost there, the officer said, ushering them all into a room. There was one other door on the opposite side, small though, like what you might expect on a full-sized locker. This door here leads directly out into the parking lot out back. We'll get you back to your car in no time. They waited for the officer to go first, but he didn't budge. Go on, let's go. I don't have all day now. Zach entered the door, then Francine, then Henry with the cop behind all of them. This new passage was small, narrow, and there was a weird optical illusion. The passage looked long, and it was, but the walls and the ceiling got progressively more narrow and shallow. Was this some sort of maintenance tunnel or something? Where was he taking them? I feel sick, Francine said. You're okay. The parking lot is just up ahead, the officer replied. He was right behind them now, ushering them along. I see it, Zach said, shining his light forward into the dark. Found the exit. Indeed, right up ahead appeared a door, and a sign above it had a picture of a dumpster on it. The indicator for the dumpster is behind the mall. It had to be. Outside, finally. Wow. I was beginning to think we'd never get out of here, Henry said. The officer gave him a heavy pat on the shoulder. Zach ran ahead and burst the door open. This was followed no less by a loud scream. Zach? Francine yelled, approaching the door. It was dark on the other side. Henry arrived beside Francine, squinting to make out what was there, but all he could see was gray concrete. The floor, though, there was no floor. His heart felt like it stopped, and his eyes widened. Did Zach fall in there? Before he could answer his own question, the officer pushed both Francine and himself over the edge and into the pit below. Henry fell and fell and fell. When he landed, it was into a well of thick black ooze. He splashed up to the surface, gasping for air, wiping his eyes. He could barely make anything out, and what he did see was gray, like life itself had been sucked out of the room. The black ooze let out horrendous belching sounds as bubbles breached its surface. Zach? Francine? He yelled. No reply from them, but the officer did from above. Zachy, Francine, where are you? The officer mimicked and mocked, then followed with 5 bone-chilling words. Let me help you look. The officer jumped off the ledge and into the pit in a full-on dive. The ooze barely made a splash. Zach and Francine finally made it to the surface, panicking frantically. Francine tried to catch her breath, and Zach fell into a fit of rage. Where is that son of a bitch? I'll kill him, Henry replied. He's in the water. They looked at him in confusion, asking him to repeat himself. He is in the water, he said again, this time more forceful. The 3 of them treaded the ooze, looking around. The pit was full of odd things. Cups, plates, hangers for clothing, stuffed animals, baseball caps, and many, many pairs of shoes. What were they doing here? What was this pit doing here? It made no sense. If a mall could ever be a living, breathing organism, Henry imagined they were in its stomach right now, being digested. That wasn't a comforting thought. "Help, please, anyone," Francine yelled. Suddenly, the cop resurfaced, covered in the dark liquid. He smiled. They screamed. Then the man started shaking violently. Henry shielded his eyes, staring. The man's mouth went agape, and his face split open, tearing, ripping. Long tendrils, like the arms of an octopus, emerged and whipped around. It took all the strength inside Henry not to faint. The group split in different directions, but all towards the wall of the pit, as far away from the thing as possible. The monster squealed like a pig, then howled like a dying hyena. It went for Zach first, latching onto his arm as he tried to fight it off. It took him down under the liquid. "Zach, no!" Francine quivered. Henry was the closest to the door they fell from. It was 10 feet above him. He could feel with his feet a protruding ledge on the wall. He tried using it to jump up to the door, not even close, but he had an idea. "Francine, the door above is too high for me to get out, but I think I can boost you up if you come over here." "We shouldn't have come here," she said, crying now. "I'm going to go under, and when I do, put your feet on my shoulders, then I'll boost you up. Got it?" She nodded. Henry took a deep breath, went under the black ooze, and positioned himself as best he could on the protrusion. Then he launched himself up, Francine on his shoulders. She wavered. "Can you reach it? Quick now, before that thing comes back." Henry could see her gripping the floor above. She had it. He used his tippy toes to give her more leverage. Once she was up, she looked back down. "Okay, your turn." "No way, Francine. I'm too heavy. Please get out of here while you still have the chance." "I'm not leaving you here to get eaten. I might not be able to pull you up, but I can hold your weight, damn it. You can swing or pull yourself up the rest of the way," she said. Henry debated this, but thought it was at least worth a shot. Francine reached down, body across the floor, and he lunged himself up, grabbing her hands. He saw her strain. "Quick," she yelled. Henry put his feet on the wall and tried to inch himself higher. Francine screamed again, her eyes darting back to the water. Henry looked down. The cop was back. Francine told him to hurry, but the black ooze was oily, and Henry's grip slipped. In slow motion, he saw himself fall straight into the jarred and jagged mouth of the monster. From up above, Francine watched in terror as the monster chomped down on another one of her best friends. Blood squirted from its mouth as Henry's skull caved in. He was kicking and fighting, but not anymore. He was dead. Francine spun around and ran. She ran down the odd passage with the weird optical illusion. She ran back down the corridors from where they had started. She ran past the bathrooms they had hidden, then the food court. Through the phone store she went, and out into the night. She had made it. She was free. Across the street, she realized she didn't have Zach's car keys, so she'd have to run home to tell someone, anyone, what had happened. Maybe they could still be saved. As Francine thought this, however, her eyes turned to the witch from the Wizard of Oz Halloween display. It was laughing and cackling and pointing its scrawny green finger down the street. She turned. There, standing ominously, was the cop from the mall, waving. All across the world, you will find many abandoned and deserted locations, factories, amusement parks, hospitals, cities, towns, ancient ruins, and yes, even shopping malls, each with their own unique histories, being built from the ground up and then falling from grace. But their skeletons still remain, beckoning us to question what happened. Using our mind's eye, We can easily imagine these places full of life. But when we do, it's often juxtaposed against a backdrop of emptiness. So what is it about abandoned places that can make us feel so uneasy? What is it about taking a tour through a ghost town that makes it so creepy? It might be too easy to say because it reminds us of a bygone era, come and gone like the burning of a candle. That's part of it. But more importantly, they may be a reminder of impermanence and the constant of change. The hidden message there that we too are a part of this change. Walk through a once booming ghost town, and it would be all too easy to imagine yourself living there, a life come and a life gone. Maybe abandoned places make us uneasy because they make us feel alone and isolated, vulnerable to our one true and ultimate fear, the unknown. Perhaps their remnants remain to make us humble, warning us to make the most out of our own time. But does the monster of Park Palace exist? Well, probably not. But it does tell us that abandoned places also have no shortage of secrets, mysteries, hiding under the dirt, dust, and debris, waiting for us to uncover them, to learn their histories so that we may learn from them. The stories they could tell might surprise us. Unfortunately, however, Henry and his friends went to the abandoned mall to have a fun time, but they got so much more than they bargained for. In this small, quaint town in northern Kentucky, the legend of Park Palace lives on.